The most dangerous men never raise their voices. They just walk into your wedding like they already own the ending. I remember the exact second the church went silent. It wasn't when the doors opened. It wasn't when the organ stopped playing halfway through the hymn. It was when my fiancé lowered his eyes like a man preparing for bad weather he knew he couldn't stop. That was the moment I understood someone terrifying had arrived. I was standing at the altar in a white silk gown worth more than my first car, holding a bouquet of ivory roses so tightly my fingers hurt beneath the lace gloves. The cathedral lights glowed gold against the marble walls, soft and warm, but suddenly the whole room felt cold enough to freeze breath. Then I heard the footsteps. Slow, measured, impossible to ignore. One pair of polished black shoes moved down the center aisle, while over 200 guests forgot how to breathe. Nobody spoke. Nobody turned. Even the priest looked pale beneath the candlelight. I didn't need to ask who it was. In New York, everybody knew the name Lucien DeMarco. Men on television called him a businessman. Politicians called him a donor. But behind closed doors, people spoke about him like a storm that could walk on 2 feet. I had only seen him once before. 3 months earlier. A charity gala downtown. He'd looked at me for exactly 4 seconds across a crowded ballroom. And somehow that had been long enough to ruin my sleep for weeks. Now he was here, at my wedding. My pulse stumbled as he stopped directly behind me. Not beside me, behind me. Close enough for me to catch the faint scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne. Close enough to feel the heat of him through layers of silk and satin. Nobody moved. My fiancé didn't even look at me anymore. He looked at the floor. Lucien's hand lifted slowly toward the back of my dress. Large hand, calm hand. The kind of hand that never shook. My breath caught when his fingers brushed the zipper at the base of my spine. It wasn't aggressive. It was worse. Careful. Deliberate. Like he had all the time in the world. The sound of the zipper lowering an inch echoed louder in my chest than the church bells outside. Hey, small movement. Barely anything. But every person in that cathedral saw it. Saw him standing behind another man's bride like the ceremony belonged to him instead. Then his mouth lowered near my ear. You're mine now, little dove. The nickname hit me harder than the touch. Little dove. Soft. Possessive. Intimate in a way that made my knees weak beneath the gown. I should have been terrified. Instead, I hated the way my heartbeat reacted to his voice. The room blurred around me. Lucien stepped back just enough for me to turn. And when I finally looked into his gray eyes, I realized something even worse than fear. He wasn't angry. He wasn't jealous. He looked absolutely certain, like this moment had belonged to him long before I ever walked down the aisle. Then he held out his hand toward me, calm as midnight, while the entire cathedral waited to see whether I would ruin my own wedding for the most dangerous man in the city. Nobody tells you how terrifying silence can become when an entire church is waiting for a bride to choose between safety and obsession. My hand trembled in the air between us while Lucien DeMarco stood there like he had already seen the ending of this story weeks before the rest of us. The candles flickered against the marble walls. Somewhere outside, I could hear traffic moving through Manhattan and distant sirens blending into the cold November rain. Normal sounds, normal life. But inside that cathedral, nothing felt real anymore. My fiancé finally looked up at me. Daniel's face had gone completely pale beneath the chapel lights. He opened his mouth once, then closed it again. That hurt more than I expected, because deep down, I realized something awful. He was not going to fight for me. Lucien did not threaten him, did not even glance his way. He simply waited with one hand extended toward me, calm and patient, like a king allowing the world time to catch up with his decision. Eveline, Daniel whispered carefully, avoiding Lucien's eyes entirely. Maybe you should go. A quiet gasp moved through the guests. My mother covered her mouth with trembling fingers. My father stared straight ahead like a man watching his worst mistake return to collect interest. And suddenly I understood this was bigger than a ruined wedding. Bigger than embarrassment. Bigger than me. I looked at my father first. What is happening? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He swallowed hard. Honey. But he could not finish. Lucien answered for him instead. Your father owes people things he could never repay. His voice stayed low, smooth, controlled. I am simply here to settle the debt before someone crueler does. The words should have terrified me. Instead, I kept noticing ridiculous details. The silver watch beneath his sleeve, the rain still darkening the shoulders of his black coat. The way he watched me like I was the only person inside the church worth seeing. I am not property, I said quietly. For the first time, something shifted in his expression.
Yes, sir.
Not anger,
I'll recheck
something
immediately.
softer, almost respectful. No, he said. That is why I came myself. The room fell silent again. Lucien stepped closer, and every instinct inside me screamed to step back. But I did not. He reached up slowly, adjusting the sleeve of my wedding gown where the lace had folded inward near my wrist. Such a tiny gesture. Gentle, careful. Somehow that frightened me more than if he had raised his voice. You should hate me, I whispered. Probably, he answered. But you do not.
Just follow me
My heartbeat
quickly.
betrayed me instantly. Because he was right. I should have been running, calling the police, crying, anything normal. Instead, I stood there staring at the most dangerous man in New York
so glad
while my
we're
pulse
finally
reacted
here.
to him like he
Me
was
too, my
gravity
love.
itself.
It's
Lucien
perfect.
lowered his hand and glanced
Just the
toward the
beginning.
cathedral doors.
You're
Outside,
mine now,
several black
little dove.
luxury SUVs waited beneath the rain-soaked streetlights. You can stay, he said softly. I will
I
walk
saw you
away if
looking.
that is what you want.
Did you?
He paused.
Yes, you made it
But if
quite
you come with
obvious.
me tonight, little dove,
Perhaps I
nobody
wanted
will
to be
ever
noticed.
touch your life again without answering
Analyze
to me
these
first.
discrepancies.
Then he stepped back
Ensure the
and gave me
numbers are
something
exact.
nobody in that
Yes,
church
sir.
expected
I'll
him to
recheck
give.
immediately.
A choice. People think choosing a dangerous man happens in one
take
dramatic
another
moment.
step.
It does not.
We
It
need to
happens
leave.
quietly, in the space
You won't
between
leave
one
here.
heartbeat and the next. In the second your feet move before your fear can stop them. I stared at Lucien's hand while the entire cathedral waited for my
The city
answer.
never sleeps,
My
just
wedding
like
veil
us.
brushed softly
But
against
tonight,
my shoulders
we
as
can
the
rest.
air conditioning
Just for a
hummed
moment.
through the old church
us.
vents above
To
us.
us.
Somewhere
We have
near
to
the back
go.
pews, somebody dropped a champagne
if they
glass.
see us?
The sound shattered the
follow me,
silence for
quickly.
half a second before disappearing again. Nobody moved afterward. Nobody dared. Lucien remained perfectly still in front of me. Calm gray eyes, relaxed shoulders,
I'm
no
so glad
pressure
we're
in his
finally
expression.
here.
That was the terrifying
Me too,
part.
my love.
He was giving me
It's
freedom
perfect.
while somehow making the entire
the
room
beginning.
feel like it already belonged
You're
to him.
mine now,
I looked
little
toward my
dove.
father again. What did you do? I asked quietly, his eyes filled with something close to shame. I
I
made
saw you
mistakes,
looking.
sweetheart.
Did you?
Lucien's
Yes,
jaw
you made it
tightened
quite
slightly
obvious.
at the word mistakes. Tiny reaction.
I wanted to be
Most
noticed.
people would never notice it. But I did.
Analyze these
Your father
discrepancies.
trusted the wrong people,
Ensure the numbers are
Lucien
exact.
said evenly.
Yes, sir.
And now those
I'll
people want
recheck
payment.
immediately.
So this is blackmail. I whispered. For the first time since
take
entering the
another step.
church, something dangerous
We need to
flickered
leave.
beneath his calm expression.
You won't leave
Not anger
here.
directed at me, more like disappointment that I could think so little of him. If I wanted to force you, he said softly, we would not still be standing here discussing
The
it.
city never sleeps,
My breath
just
caught,
like us.
because he was right again.
tonight,
Every
we can
instinct
rest.
told me Lucien
Just for a
DeMarco
moment.
was a man who
To
could
us.
control
To
entire
us.
rooms
We have
with
to
one
go.
phone call. Yet he stood in front of me
But what if
waiting
they
for
see
permission
us?
like my choice
Just follow me
actually mattered
quickly.
to him. Daniel suddenly stepped forward from beside the altar. Eveline, he said carefully, maybe this is bigger than us. Bigger than us. The words landed like ice water.
I'm so glad
Not
we're
stay with
finally
me.
here.
Not I love you.
Me
Just
too, my
surrender
love.
dressed up as reason.
It's perfect.
I slowly removed my engagement
Just
ring.
the beginning.
My hands shook so badly,
You're
I almost
mine
dropped
now,
it onto the
little dove.
cathedral floor. Daniel stared at the ring in my palm, but made no move to stop me. That hurt more than
saw
anything
you
Lucien
looking.
had done tonight.
Did you?
I placed
Yes,
the
you made
ring
it quite
gently on the
obvious.
altar beside the bouquet of
Perhaps
white
I wanted
roses.
to be noticed.
Then I turned back toward Lucien.
Analyze
The room
these
seemed to
discrepancies.
inhale all at once.
Ensure the numbers
His
are exact.
eyes lowered
Yes, sir.
briefly to my
I'll
empty
recheck
hand
immediately.
before lifting to my face again. Something unreadable moved through his
take another
expression.
step.
Relief maybe, or
We need to
disbelief. If I walk out those
won't
doors
leave
with you,
here.
I whispered, my life changes forever. It already did, he answered. Honest, simple, no false promises, no charm,
The city never
just
sleeps,
truth
just
spoken
like us.
quietly enough to break
But
me
tonight,
apart.
we can
Rain
rest.
tapped softly
Just for a
against the
moment.
cathedral windows
To us.
as I finally
To us.
placed my hand
We
in
have
his.
to go.
Warm fingers closed around mine
But what if they
immediately.
see us?
Firm,
Just follow
protective,
me, quickly.
not possessive the way I expected. More like he was making a promise without speaking it aloud. Lucien guided me down the aisle slowly while hundreds of guests watched in complete silence.
I'm so
My wedding
glad we're
dress
finally
brushed
here.
against the marble floor
Me
with
too,
every
my
step.
love.
I could feel their eyes
Perfect.
following us. Shock,
Just the
fear,
beginning.
curiosity.
You're
But
mine
Lucien
now,
never
little
looked at
dove.
any of them. Only me. When we reached the cathedral doors, Cold November air rushed against my skin.
I saw you looking.
Black SUVs waited along the curb
Yes, you made
beneath
it quite
glowing
obvious.
streetlights and falling rain.
Perhaps
One
I
of
wanted to be
Lucien's
noticed.
men opened the rear passenger door
Analyze these
instantly,
discrepancies.
lowering his head
Ensure the
respectfully
numbers are
toward me
exact.
like I was
Yes,
royalty
sir.
instead
I'll
of a
recheck
runaway
immediately.
bride. I hesitated beside the car. What happens now? I
take
asked
another
quietly.
step.
Lucien looked down at
We
me
need
for
to
a
leave.
long moment before answering.
You won't leave
Now, little
here.
dove, he murmured softly. You finally learn why the entire city was afraid to let me meet you. New York looks different when you sit beside a man
The city never
everyone
sleeps,
fears.
just like us.
The city stops feeling
But
loud.
tonight,
It
we
starts
can
feeling
rest.
careful.
Just for a
Rain
moment.
slid down the
To
tinted
us.
windows
To
of the
us.
SUV
We
while
have to
Manhattan
go.
blurred into gold and silver
But what if they
outside
see us?
beside the highway.
Just follow me,
Nobody
quickly.
inside the vehicle spoke. The driver kept both hands tight on the wheel. The man in the front passenger seat stared straight ahead, like even breathing too loudly around Lucien DeMarco could become a
I'm so glad
mistake.
we're finally
And
here.
Lucien himself sat
Me
beside
too,
me
my
in
love.
complete silence,
It's perfect.
one arm resting calmly against
Just
the
the
leather
beginning.
seat. Gray eyes focused
You're
on the
mine
city
now,
lights
little
passing
dove.
beyond the glass. He had taken me from my wedding less than an hour ago, yet somehow the strangest part
I
was
saw you
this.
looking.
He had not touched
you?
me again.
Yes, you
Not
made it
once.
quite obvious.
No demands. No threats.
Perhaps I
no.
wanted to be noticed.
Smug smile from stealing another
Analyze
man's
these
bride.
discrepancies.
Just silence.
Ensure the
Controlled
numbers
and
are
patient
exact.
enough to make my
Yes, sir.
nerves ache beneath
I'll
my
recheck
skin.
immediately.
I finally looked down at my hands twisting together in my lap.
Don't
Where are we
take another
going?
step.
Lucien answered without
We need to
looking
leave.
away from the window. Home.
won't leave here.
The word sent a strange chill through me. Not because of what he said, because of how naturally he said it. Like there had never been another outcome. I swallowed carefully.
The city never
You
sleeps,
barely
just
know
like
me.
us.
That finally made him
Tonight,
glance toward me.
we can rest.
That is not true.
Just for a moment.
Something about the certainty in his
us.
voice made
We
my
have to
heartbeat
go.
stumble again. Outside,
But what if
the
they
rain
see us?
grew heavier, streaking
follow me,
across the
quickly.
city in silver lines while traffic slowed near downtown. Lucien loosened the cuffs of his black coat slightly before speaking again. You volunteer every Sunday at St. Gabriel's
I'm so glad
Shelter
we're
in
finally
Brooklyn.
here.
My breath caught.
Me too,
You
my
stopped to
love.
buy coffee for the
It's
elderly
perfect.
man outside Lexington Avenue
Just the
Station
beginning.
every Thursday morning.
You're
I stared
mine
at him in
now, little
disbelief.
dove.
And every December, he continued quietly, you leave anonymous gifts at the pediatric wing of Mount
I saw you
Sinai
looking.
because you think
you?
children deserve
Yes, you
magic
made it
during
quite
Christmas, even when they are sick.
Perhaps
The car
I wanted
suddenly
to be
felt too
noticed.
small around me. How do you know all
Analyze
that?
these discrepancies.
Lucien held my gaze for a long
Ensure the
moment.
numbers are exact.
Because I pay attention.
sir.
No
I'll recheck
arrogance.
immediately.
No apology. Just truth spoken softly enough to leave me
Don't take
defenseless
another
against it. I turned toward the
We need to
rain-covered window again,
You
trying to
won't
steady
leave
my
here.
breathing. That sounds a little insane. To my surprise, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Probably. Silence settled
The
between
city
us
never
once
sleeps,
more,
just like
but
us.
this time it felt
But
different.
tonight,
Heavier.
we can rest.
More personal.
Just for a
I
moment.
looked down at the wedding
us.
dress still
To us.
wrapped around me
We have
like
to go.
evidence of another life I had abandoned
But what if
less
they
than an
see
hour
us?
earlier. The
Just
loosened
follow me,
zipper at my
quickly.
back brushed cool air against my skin every time I shifted. Lucien noticed immediately. Of course he did. He reached beside him, removed his black cashmere coat, and
I'm
placed
so
it
glad
gently
we're
over my
finally
shoulders
here.
without a word.
Me too,
Warmth
my
surrounded
love.
me instantly.
It's perfect.
Expensive cedarwood cologne
Just the
lingered
beginning.
faintly in the fabric.
You're mine
Dangerous
now,
how
little dove.
comforting it felt. You should not be cold, he said simply. I hated how quickly my body relaxed beneath
I
his
saw you
coat.
looking.
The
Did
SUV
you?
finally turned
Yes, you
through
made it quite
massive wrought
obvious.
iron gates overlooking the Hudson
Perhaps
River.
I wanted to be
My
noticed.
breath caught as the estate came
Analyze
into
these
view beyond the
discrepancies.
rain. It was not a
Ensure the
mansion.
numbers are exact.
Mansions belonged
Yes,
in
sir.
magazines.
I'll recheck
This place looked
immediately.
older, colder, like something built by powerful men who
Don't take
trusted
another
stone more than people. Warm
need to
golden
leave.
lights glowed through towering
won't leave
windows,
here.
while black security cars lined the circular driveway. One by one, men stepped outside the moment Lucien's vehicle stopped. Not armed guards
The city
behaving like
never
criminals.
sleeps, just like us.
Professionals.
But
Quiet.
tonight,
Disciplined.
we can rest.
Respectful.
Just for a moment.
And the second Lucien
us.
opened his
To
door,
us.
every
We have
single
to
one
go.
of them lowered their heads slightly
But what if
toward
they
him
see us?
before their eyes shifted
Just
to me.
follow me, quickly.
Not curiosity, recognition. Like they already knew who I was before I ever arrived. Lucien stepped around the SUV and opened my door himself. Rain misted softly through the cold
I'm
night
so glad
air
we're
while he
finally
extended
here.
his hand toward me
Me
again.
too, my love.
Welcome home, little
It's
dove, he
perfect.
said quietly. And somehow
Just
that
the
frightened me
beginning.
far more than being kidnapped
You're
ever
mine
could.
now, little
Some
dove.
houses are so beautiful they stop feeling human. Lucien's estate looked exactly like that. The kind of place
saw you
built by
looking.
men who trusted
you?
money more
Yes,
than
you made it
warmth
quite
and
obvious.
power more than peace. Rain glistened across the stone driveway while tall iron gates closed slowly behind us with a deep metallic sound that echoed through the night. I stepped out of the SUV carefully, still wrapped in Lucien's black coat, my wedding dress brushing against the wet pavement beneath the cold November air. The estate stood above the Hudson River like something carved out of old European history and dropped into New York by mistake. Massive windows glowed gold against the darkness, while security lights cut through the rain like silver knives. Every instinct told me I should feel trapped. Instead, I felt watched, protected, and somehow that scared me more. Lucien stayed close enough to guide me without touching me directly. Always careful, always controlled. Men in dark suits opened the front doors before we even reached the marble staircase. The inside of the house was quieter than any mansion I had ever imagined. No loud music, no parties, no chaos. Just soft piano music drifting somewhere far away and the faint crackle of fireplaces warming the enormous halls. My heels clicked against polished black marble while portraits of long-dead men stared down from the walls like silent judges. You live here alone? I asked quietly. Mostly. His answer disappeared into the high ceilings above us. A woman around her 60s appeared near the grand staircase wearing a dark navy dress and white gloves. She looked elegant enough to belong in another century. Miss Brooks, she said warmly, lowering her head slightly toward me. Welcome. I am Mrs. Ricci. I blinked in surprise. She already knew my name. Everyone here did. Your room has been prepared, she continued gently. And dinner can be served whenever you are comfortable. Comfortable. The word almost made me laugh. Lucien removed his coat from my shoulders carefully before handing it to another staff member without even glancing their way. Mrs. Ricci will help you settle in, he said calmly. You must be exhausted. I folded my arms instinctively. You were just leaving? Something unreadable crossed his face for half a second. Would you prefer I stayed? My pulse reacted immediately, embarrassing enough that I looked away before he could notice. The truth was worse than fear now. His absence already felt heavier than his presence. I do not even know the rules here, I whispered. Lucien stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice enough that only I could hear him. There are only two. His gray eyes held mine steadily. Nobody enters your room without permission. He paused. And nobody makes you uncomfortable, including me. The second rule hit harder than the first, because dangerous men were not supposed to sound careful around women like me. Mrs. Ricci led me upstairs while Lucien disappeared down another hallway lined with dark wood and dim gold lighting. I caught several men lowering their heads respectfully as he passed them. Nobody questioned him. Nobody interrupted him. The entire house moved around Lucien DeMarco like he was gravity itself. My bedroom door opened slowly, revealing a room larger than my first apartment in Brooklyn. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river, while candles flickered softly beside a fireplace already burning low against the cold rain outside. In there, laid neatly across the center of the enormous bed, sat folded clothes in my exact size. Cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, designer heels, winter coats. Every single piece looked chosen specifically for me. My throat tightened as I walked closer. How long has this been here? I asked quietly. Mrs. Ricci hesitated just enough to answer the question without speaking. My stomach dropped. He prepared all this before tonight? She gave me a small sympathetic smile. Miss Brooks, she said softly, Mr. DeMarco has been waiting for you much longer than you realize. I barely slept that night. Every time thunder rolled across the Hudson River, I opened my eyes expecting to remember this had all been some impossible nightmare. But the candles were still burning low beside the fireplace. The silk sheets still smelled faintly like lavender. And Lucien DeMarco's world still existed outside my bedroom door. Morning arrived gray and cold beyond the giant windows overlooking the river. Manhattan stretched across the distance beneath winter clouds while rain continued tapping softly against the glass. For a few quiet seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I noticed the folded note resting beside the bed. Breakfast whenever you are ready, little dove. No pressure. The elegant handwriting somehow unsettled me more than threats would have. I stared at the note for almost a full minute before finally standing. My wedding dress had disappeared overnight. In its place hung cream-colored cashmere loungewear beside the closet doors, perfectly my size again. Everything in this house already seemed designed around me before I even arrived. That realization followed me downstairs an hour later, while Mrs. Ricci guided me through endless hallways filled with dark wood, marble floors, and soft piano music drifting through hidden speakers. The estate looked less intimidating during daylight, but only slightly. Men in suits moved quietly through the halls, speaking in low voices whenever Lucien's name was mentioned. Every single person treated me differently now, carefully, respectfully, like they had already decided my place in this world before I understood it myself. Mrs. Ricci finally opened the doors to a private dining room overlooking the river. Lucien sat alone at the far end of the long table, wearing a charcoal gray sweater instead of his usual black suit. Somehow that looked even more dangerous, more human. Sunlight filtered faintly across his dark hair while he read through documents beside untouched coffee. He looked up the second I entered, always immediately aware of me. "Did you sleep?" he asked calmly. I hesitated before sitting across from him. A little. His eyes drifted briefly toward the untouched wedding ring still sitting in my hand. I had not realized I was holding it again until then. Heat crept into my face as I quickly placed it beside my plate. Lucien did not comment on it. "You should eat," he said quietly instead. Silver trays covered the table. Fresh fruit, eggs, pancakes dusted lightly with powdered sugar. Even hazelnut coffee exactly the way I liked it. I looked at him carefully. "You know what coffee I drink too? 2 creams. No sugar." His expression never changed. "You wrinkle your nose when it is too bitter." My stomach tightened again. This is not normal. Lucien leaned back slightly in his chair. "No," he agreed softly. "It is not." Silence settled between us while rain streaked the windows overlooking the river. I tried to focus on breakfast, but my attention kept drifting toward him instead, toward the strange contradiction sitting across from me. Every rumor I had ever heard about Lucien painted him as ruthless, untouchable, cold. Yet this man noticed when my coffee tasted wrong. "Why me?" I finally whispered. His fork lowered slowly onto the plate. For the first time since meeting him, Lucien looked almost tired. Because everyone else sees power when they look at me. His gray eyes lifted toward mine again. Quiet, honest. "You looked at me once like I was still human." My breath caught softly in my throat. Then sudden voices echoed from the hallway outside. Angry voices. One of the dining room doors swung open before anyone announced themselves. A tall man in an expensive navy suit stormed inside. Stopping short the second he saw me sitting across from Lucien. "So the rumors are true," he said sharply. "You really brought her here." Lucien's entire body changed instantly. Not dramatic. Worse. Stillness settled over him like ice forming across deep water. The room temperature itself seemed to drop. "Leave," he said quietly. The man glanced at me again. "She is turning you weak." Lucien rose slowly from his chair. Calm, controlled, terrifyingly composed. "I will only say this once," he murmured. "Do not speak about her again." And suddenly I understood something nobody in New York had ever explained properly about Lucien DeMarco. The city was not afraid because he lost control. The city was afraid because he almost never did. The strange thing about fear is that eventually it gets replaced by curiosity. By the third day inside Lucien DeMarco's estate, I was no longer afraid of the security guards outside every hallway or the endless black cars waiting beyond the gates. I was afraid of understanding him too well. The man from breakfast left the estate immediately after Lucien's warning that morning. Nobody spoke about it afterward. Nobody even mentioned his name. Yet the entire house felt different for the rest of the day, quieter than before, like everyone inside understood invisible rules I was only beginning to notice. Lucien himself disappeared into meetings for hours at a time. Men in tailored suits arrived through private entrances carrying folders and speaking in low voices. Expensive watches flashed beneath cufflinks while tension followed them through the halls like expensive cologne. But no matter how busy the house became, somebody always checked whether I had eaten. Fresh flowers appeared in my room every morning. And every evening at exactly 7 o'clock, dinner waited for me whether Lucien was home or not. Careful, consistent, intentional, like someone building trust brick by brick instead of demanding it all at once. That afternoon, I wandered into the estate library while rain drifted. Softly beyond the towering windows overlooking the river. The The room smelled like old paper, cedar wood, and fireplace smoke. Thousands of books lined dark wooden shelves from floor to ceiling, while warm amber lights glowed against leather chairs and polished marble floors. It felt less like a mafia mansion and more like a place built by someone deeply lonely. I ran my fingers across the spines absent-mindedly until I froze beside one particular shelf. My favorite novel sat there. A rare edition with faded blue binding that had gone out of print years ago. My stomach tightened slowly. I pulled the book free carefully and opened the cover. Inside, neat handwriting stretched across the first page. For Eveline. Someday. My pulse stumbled. The handwriting belonged to Lucien. You found it. His voice behind me nearly made me drop the book. I turned too quickly, clutching it against my chest while he stood near the doorway wearing a dark wool coat dusted lightly with rain. His tie had been loosened slightly, exhaustion shadowing his sharp features beneath the soft library lights. You bought this for me? I asked quietly. Lucien stepped further into the room. 3 years ago. 3 years. The number echoed through my chest. Why? He looked toward the fireplace instead of answering immediately. Because you mentioned once that your mother used to read it to you during thunderstorms. My breath caught completely. At the charity gala, he added softly before I could ask. You were speaking to someone near the balcony. I stared at him in disbelief. He remembered one passing conversation from years ago. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Lucien finally looked back at me, gray eyes steady and unreadable. You remember things about people when they matter to you. Nobody had ever said something so dangerous to me in such a quiet voice before. I lowered my eyes toward the book in my hands, suddenly unable to breathe normally. This is insane, I whispered again, but the words sounded weaker now, less convincing. Lucien moved closer slowly, careful enough that I noticed every inch between us disappear. Probably, he said softly. Then his hand lifted toward my face. My entire body tensed instinctively, but instead of touching me, he gently brushed a strand of hair away from the candle flame flickering beside my shoulder. Nothing more. Such a tiny movement. Yet my heartbeat reacted like he had reached directly into my chest. Lucien stepped back immediately afterward, as though he understood exactly how dangerous even that small touch felt between us. Then his phone buzzed sharply inside his coat pocket. The shift in his expression happened instantly. Cold focus returned to his face like a mask sliding back into place. He answered quietly, listening for several seconds before his jaw tightened. When? He asked calmly. Silence followed. Then his eyes slowly lifted toward me across the library. Do not let anyone near the gates until I get there. The call ended. Every warm feeling inside the room vanished with it. What happened? I asked carefully. Lucien slid the phone back into his pocket without looking away from me. Someone just tried to find out whether you are really here. The first thing I learned about powerful men was that everyone around them eventually becomes afraid of disappointing them. The second thing I learned was worse. Lucien DeMarco was more afraid for me than for himself. The moment he ended the call inside the library, the entire atmosphere of the house shifted around him. Men appeared almost instantly near the hallways outside, speaking quietly into earpieces, while security gates somewhere beyond the estate grounds began locking one after another with heavy metallic sounds. Rain continued falling across the Hudson River outside the towering windows, but inside the library, everything suddenly felt too still, too careful. Lucien crossed the room toward me slowly, his attention fixed entirely on my face. You need to stay inside tonight. His voice remained calm, but I noticed it immediately now. The slight tension beneath it, the controlled edge he tried to hide whenever something involved me directly. Who was trying to get through the gates? I asked quietly. He hesitated for half a second. That alone terrified me more than the answer probably would have. Someone curious. I folded my arms. Instinctively. You do not lock down an entire estate because somebody is curious. His eyes softened briefly with something almost like frustration. Not because I challenged him, because he knew I was right. There are people who think you are becoming important to me, he admitted finally. That can create problems. Important. The word settled strangely inside my chest. I should have wanted distance from him. Escape. Yet hearing him say that felt dangerously close to relief. One of the security men appeared quietly at the library entrance. Everything is secure, sir. Lucien nodded once without taking his eyes off me. Nobody enters the east grounds tonight. Yes, sir. The man disappeared immediately afterward. Silence settled between us again, while firelight flickered softly against the bookshelves around us. I looked down at the old blue novel, still resting in my hands. This is my fault, is it not? Lucien's expression changed instantly. No, sharp. Immediate. Certain. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Nothing about this is your fault, Eveline. Hearing my name from him instead of Little Dove made my pulse stumble unexpectedly. More intimate somehow. More real. Then why does it feel like everyone here is protecting me from something? I whispered. Lucien looked toward the rain-covered windows for several long seconds before answering. Because they are. Honest again. Always honest in the worst possible ways. I should have been terrified. Instead, all I could focus on was the exhaustion shadowing his face beneath the warm library lights. Lucien looked like a man carrying too much weight alone for too many years. Have you eaten today? The question left my mouth before I could stop it. His eyes returned to mine slowly, genuine surprise flickering there for the first time since I met him. That is what concerns you right now. I shrugged softly, embarrassed suddenly. You look tired. Something unreadable moved through his expression. Something quieter than desire. More dangerous than possession. Nobody had probably asked whether Lucien DeMarco was tired in a very long time. The room seemed to narrow around us as he stepped closer again. Not enough to frighten me. Just enough for me to notice the warmth of him standing there. You should stop doing that, he murmured softly. Doing what? Looking at me like I am worth saving. My breath caught painfully in my throat. Before I could answer, thunder rolled across the river outside, rattling softly through the enormous windows. The lights flickered once. Then suddenly the entire estate went dark. Every lamp vanished at once. The fireplace became the only source of light inside the library, casting gold shadows across Lucien's face, while distant voices echoed through the halls beyond us. Instantly, his body shifted between me and the door. Protective. Automatic. Not even a conscious decision. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Somewhere downstairs, an alarm began ringing through the darkness. The alarm did not sound loud. It sounded controlled, precise, like the house itself had learned how to panic quietly around Lucien DeMarco. Red emergency lights flickered faintly through the dark hallways beyond the library, while rain hammered harder against the towering windows overlooking the Hudson River. Somewhere downstairs, rapid footsteps echoed across marble floors followed by short bursts of voices through security radios. Yet inside the library, Lucien remained perfectly still in front of me, one arm slightly extended behind him without touching me directly, shielding me anyway. Stay close to me, he said quietly. Not fear, not panic, just certainty. The fireplace cast gold shadows across his sharp features while thunder rolled through the estate again. I realized then that danger never made Lucien louder. It made him calmer. The library doors opened suddenly, and two security men stepped inside. The backup generators are online, sir, one of them reported quickly. But somebody cut the exterior cameras near the south gate for 37 seconds. Lucien's expression did not change. Anyone get inside? No confirmed breach. The man hesitated slightly before continuing. But there was a vehicle parked near the river road. Lucien nodded once. Double the perimeter. Then his eyes shifted toward me again instantly, like I mattered more than the rest of the conversation combined. And nobody approaches this wing without my approval. The men left immediately afterward, shutting the doors behind them. Silence returned except for the storm outside and the soft crackling of the fireplace beside us. I folded my arms tightly against the cold. This is insane, I whispered. I am just a woman from Brooklyn. Why would anybody care where I am? Lucien stared at the flames for several long seconds before answering. Because people notice when powerful men change. Something painful tightened in my chest. And I changed you. His gaze lifted slowly toward mine. Honest again. Always honest when he could have lied. Yes. The words settled heavily between us while rain streaked the windows behind him. Nobody had ever looked at me the way Lucien did in that moment. Not like a possession, not even like a fantasy. More like I had become the only soft thing left inside a life built entirely from steel. You barely know me, I said quietly. I know enough. His voice lowered. I know you apologize to waiters when they bump into you. I know you cry during old black and white movies, even when the ending is happy. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I know, he continued softly. That you still send money to your mother's church every month, even though nobody notices except the accountant processing the donation. I could barely breathe now. How long have you been watching me? Lucien finally looked away for the first time. Long enough to know you deserve better than the life waiting for you at that altar. The storm outside seemed quieter suddenly. Smaller somehow. I stared at him across the dim library light while my heartbeat betrayed me completely again. Because the terrifying truth was no longer that Lucien frightened me. It was that part of me felt safer standing behind him in the dark than I had ever felt standing beside anyone else in daylight. Another crash of thunder rattled through the estate. Instinctively, I flinched. Lucien noticed immediately. Of course he did. Without a word. He removed his dark wool coat and stepped closer, draping it gently around my shoulders again. Warmth surrounded me instantly. Familiar. Cedarwood. Familiar safety. You should not be cold, he murmured. My fingers tightened around the fabric before I could stop myself. Lucien's eyes dropped briefly to my hand clutching his coat. Something vulnerable flickered across his face so quickly I almost imagined it. Then the library doors opened once more. Mrs. Ricci stood there looking unusually pale beneath the emergency lights. Sir, she said carefully, Miss Brooks' father is at the front gates. The room went completely silent. Lucien did not move for several seconds. Then very slowly, his jaw tightened. Alone? Yes, sir. I looked up at him immediately. My father came here. Lucien's expression turned unreadable again, colder now. Protective in a way that suddenly made my pulse race harder than the alarm ever did. It seems, he said quietly, the past finally caught up with us tonight.